All right, welcome to the second piece of Module 3, in which we will be discovering how to be responsible. You may be thinking, oh, I'm already so responsible in so many areas, I can't take anything else onto my plate. But I'm actually going to be taking some things off your plate, which is going to be great. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about this concept of responsibility for and how it contrasts to responsibility to, and kind of find the right balance for each of you on a variety of topics, as well as the role of self-soothing and how important self-regulation is in order to hang out in the more helpful of these two postures, responsibility for and responsibility to. As I jump into this topic, I just want to give a quick shout out to a colleague of mine, Lindsay Werner, who was pretty central in the development of some of these terms with me. She's also an LPC supervisor in the area. So in responsibility for and responsibility to, let's first just define what is responsibility for. Can you think about this idea, imagining that the struggles, mood, problems, challenges, and difficulties that belong to someone else actually belong to you, and that not solving or resolving their items means something negative about you, or means something negative about the relationship, maybe means something negative about your performance in the relationship. Believing that you cannot handle their distress or discomfort while retaining your own shape. That concept, retaining your own shape, meaning staying true to you, your values, beliefs, and principles, keeping your 2 feet on the ground, thoughtfully responding, and living up to your highest values. That's what retaining your own shape is, right? So responsibility for kicks up when we believe that we can't handle the other person's distress and retain our own shape. And so we'll talk about how you can actually balance that out in a different way. So as I list these traits of being in responsibility for, I want you to grab your notepad. I want you to write down one word from each of these lists that you most highly identify with. You're probably going to laugh. You're probably going to identify with all of them. That's okay. Everybody does. But I want you to pick out one that really kind of shouts at you. Okay, so within responsibility for, here are some things that you do. You fix, rescue, you save, you control, you carry their feelings. You're not a very good listener. Right? And so those are some of the behaviors that we would see within responsibility for. Some of the things that you may feel would be threatened, tired, anxious, fearful, liable, resentful, resistant, shut down, overwhelmed, and feeling stuck. If we look at behavior, we may notice that you will deny your own contribution. You will minimize your responsibility, and you will blame others. Within relational behavior, you may exert emotional demand. That means that we use our emotions to get our needs met. We use our emotions to contort the other person and get them to give us what we want. It often feels to the other person like they're being manipulated when someone's using emotional demand. Within also this relational behavior, we may distance, we may kind of hang it in on a fight just to be right. We may pursue approval seeking, talking to lots of different people and getting all of their opinions. What do you think? What do you think? This actually ends up having us gossip a bit. It is the use of one of those chronic anxiety regulators of using a triangle, right? Reaching out to a third person or object to calm ourselves down. So that's one of the things you may see. And then you may also, the information may go the other direction. You may tell other people what you think they should think or feel or do. Some of the thoughts that you may notice would be that you'd be having thoughts of inadequacy within your own self. I guess that I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. I didn't do enough. You may have thoughts about the other that are also reflecting on inadequacy within them. Having thoughts like they're not good enough. You may be having negative, character focused thoughts about your partner, which would indicate to you, as do all of these traits indicate to you that you're probably in responsibility for, right? So you are in a posture of taking responsibility for the other person's mood, situations, and challenges. And you kind of jump over into their lane and try to take it on. And when you do that, you have all of these unintended consequences. We can switch now to something that's a much more helpful posture, but often much more difficult to do, which is responsibility two. Okay, so here I'll define that belief that I choose what problems and issues I step in to manage based on my own values, based on my own capacity, and that I choose how to be a resource to others, and that I can handle their discomfort. Reminding myself that my own value does not depend on how much or how frequently or how well I rescue others. What I am responsible to is being the best version of me. So let's look at the contrasting items that we might see ourselves doing that would tell us that we were in responsibility too. What I do is show compassion, use honesty and vulnerability. I encourage, I show up as a resource rather than to rescue. I confront with honesty, and I show sensitivity, compassionate, and I listen. Some things that we can look at in the category of what it is that we feel is that we may find ourselves feeling relaxed and free, aware of what's going on, right? Not numb and checked out, clear, grounded, open, having courage and hope, kind of a positive perspective of what the options could be for myself and in my relationships, as well as having this perspective we talk about called a growth mindset, meaning that mistakes are good and valuable and that they reflect that we are trying. It is very different from perfectionism. The idea that I get to try all the time and I get to make all these mistakes. How amazing is that? Because it tells me that one, I'm putting in my effort, and that two, that I'm growing. And so we approach mistakes from that perspective, that growth mindset, when we are in responsibility two. Our behavior is, you can see, pretty different from the responsibility four category. When we're in responsibility two, we are appropriately owning our own contributions. We are focusing and working to understand what is my own personal responsibility. And we are honest about that. We take responsibility for the things that do belong to us. We confront our own selves consistently when we're in responsibility two about ways in which we might have missed the mark according to what our values are. We don't feel threatened by clarifying to others what mistakes we've made because we feel solid in our own sense of self and values. Within the relational behavior, we state our preferences. The way we know that we're doing that is things sound like I'd like, I want, I'd prefer, versus you must, you should. So we would state our preferences, knowing also that if our partner declines, that we will not exert any emotional consequences. Rather, we'll just pursue other resources to work to get our needs met. We stay connected rather than cutting off. We communicate with grace and kindness. We seek collaboration, knowing that the goal is not to be right, but to find support for ourselves and for others. We offer negotiations. We use creativity when we're trying to solve problems. A lot of the rigidity of responsibility 4 is drained away when we're in responsibility 2. We are comfortable with allowing others to have their own diverse thoughts and feelings. We don't feel threatened or liable for that diversity. And we relate in the one-on-one, meaning we relate directly to the person we have tension with rather than triangling in other people or other activities in order to calm ourselves down. We do the hard thing and have one-on-one discussions within responsibility 2. And you can see here how our thoughts may look a bit different than perhaps they did in responsibility 4. My thoughts when I'm in responsibility 2, being responsible to the best version of me, then the view of my own self-worth is both positive and realistic, right? It's not exaggerated, but it's not underground. It's not subhuman, right? My view of other people's self-worth also positive and realistic. I'm honest about the ways in which I miss the mark. I'm honest about the patterns I've seen in my partner, about the ways in which sometimes they struggle. But even when I'm being realistic in that way, honest in that way, I continue to reflect from a positive perspective, believing the best about their intent, believing the best about my opportunities and my capacities, even within that realistic view. So you can see how the combination of those two might be kind of difficult sometimes, right? But how supportive it would be to difficult conversations that the two of you are having, and how it may stop the conversation from escalating, especially towards contempt, right? Which is something that we are all going to be on the lookout for. So I say one new good life goal is to be responsible to you, and how that can actually end up being so incredibly supportive to you being loving and available as a resource in the relationships that are in your life. Here we go again on self-soothing. We're about to wrap up, but just one note on the role of self-soothing as we're working to take responsibility for our own life in being responsible to ourselves. So taking responsibility, being responsible to you, is only an option if you're able to self-soothe, right? Otherwise, you will feel overwhelmed. So you see the calculation I've made is taking responsibility minus self-soothing equals being overwhelmed. So if you notice that you are kind of hanging out in that really good position of being responsible to you, and you're feeling really overwhelmed, my guess is we need to crank up the self-regulation and crank up the self-soothing to where you can feel some of those feelings we talked about: calm, relaxed, open, grounded, things like that. So how do you keep on upping your game on self-regulation and self-care? The beginning of the homework is going to ask again, what are 4 items of self-regulation you're willing to try this week? And so I want you to keep on moving through that list I gave you early on in the program, and keep on maybe trying out ones you hadn't tried in the past, some ones that aren't as, that don't come as naturally to you. Because we need to be creating a big buffer, a good amount of savings in your emotional bank account for you to try and experiment with this new perspective of being responsible to you and working to take less responsibility for others in ways that don't belong to you. So just a note on your homework, I want you to continue to attend to the self-regulation behaviors. We have gone over, a lot of the homework has to do with the first video, but in your date night questions and exercises, right, I want you to identify which self-regulation skills are you going to try this week. As well as the second one is A second question is, are there any moments of contempt you'd like to apologize, offer, repair for? So that falls so squarely within that position of being responsible to you and confronting your own self and offering appropriate remorse and apologies when you've missed the mark. And then also that third date night question is to create a shorthand phrase you'll be using for taking a break and sharing that plan with your partner, which is a really good exercise you can use after both video 1 as well as after this one, as you will see how important self-soothing is in order for you to be able to be responsible to you and be a resource to your partner. And so being able to take breaks is going to be an essential piece of being able to walk that out well. Alright guys, so we are at the end of this video. You know now from both of these videos what to do with your homework, and so I will see you soon.